You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome here to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Mouthful every time. I am your host, Skyler Timmons, joined here once again with a hat, really short hair, and a mustache. It's Evan Lang. Also joined by a good friend of ours with his long hair, hat, and the mustache, little soul patch goatee combo. It's our good buddy Patrick Lyons.
I want to pick up Evan's bit where he just says nothing, but I do want to say hi. So what's going on, guys?
Again, our good buddy Patrick from Just Baseball and Rockies Insider, all kinds of fun stuff. Getting back from spring training, had some boots on the ground out there. So we're excited to have you here, Patrick. Always appreciate your insights and having you on to give us the insights and access that sometimes we can't get to.
Yeah. Well, he let us in with a hat, and I'm like, okay, well, two of us are wearing hats.
Mm-hmm. We have the different fades. I have the short cut hair. Evan has the very short hair. That's the nice way of saying it. And then Patrick's got the long hair. So we're covering all our bases.
I mean, you can call it a buzz cut if you want to be nice.
The nature's buzz cut.
With all these mustaches and rooting for the Rockies, we look too much alike. We're in a game of guess who. We're gonna get knocked out in like one fell swoop. I feel like
maybe Rockies people just sort of naturally gravitate towards the mustache.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tyler Kinley has had a pretty good mustache in the past.
Remember Ben Polson? He had the big old mustache that one year.
I do remember the Ben Polson mustache. Zach Agnos with his mustache, who we talked to a couple days ago.
Yeah. Bud
Black has had a mustache at one point.
Patrick, you should ask Bud Black. Is he ever going to grow him back?
No, he said, yeah, the mustache is definitely done. I've always like kind of changed my look up like every few years. And I mean, I still do a little bit with growing it long and then getting it short, but this is the longest I've kind of had the same facial hair for a while. And the mustache I grew in the early spring and late winter of 2018, right when Ian Desmond grew his mustache. So I was like, I beat you to it, but I was nobody at that point. I was just starting out. So
Desi looked good. That's a good. Desi looked good with a mustache too. It's a handsome fella right there.
Yeah, he had a great stash.
There you go.
And then Tony Walters too. He was. I think he might have been like the season after that. But by that point, my mustache had been somewhat established, so I felt okay about that.
At that point, we had been recommended that we do not dash on the stash.
This is true.
Very much so. But hey, speaking of new looks, we're not here to just talk about facial hair and stuff.
We're not.
That's next week's podcast. What? That's our new podcast. This is a little preview of it. Stash Talk. But speaking of new looks, the Colorado Rockies, who are in the midst of spring training, and more or less the theme that it seems, Patrick and Evan, is the Rockies looking to veer more towards the youth movement, or at least just shifting the team around to give it a bit of a new look, or hopefully just a little bit of juice into it. But first thing we want to ask is right towards Patrick, since he was down there. Just what was the general vibe of camp that you've noticed there in these first early bit of spring training?
Well, you start off by saying new look, and I thought you were going to ask me about the Rockies' new City Connect uniforms, because all of that is down there at the complex at Salt River Fields.
You've seen them?
I can tell you this. They kept it under lock and key. I was poking and prodding and opening up doors maybe that I shouldn't have been. No, I wasn't doing that actually. But I did not get any intel. Now, I was even looking in, for some players who would have certain wristbands or batting gloves that had certain different colors to possibly suggest that they were going to go a certain route, kind of like with the Yankees. I don't know if you've seen a lot of the Yankees have like that Tiffany blue, that mint color. That makes me think that if the Rockies do, or if the Yankees do ever go with the City Connect, they're going to have like a Tiffany mint as like the big accent color, which I think would work with navy and white. So I was looking everywhere for some kind of hint, and I could not find a single one. So unfortunately, no breaking news on the new look of the City Connect, but some players have seen it already. I think they're going to wait to do some of the photographs like in the mountains, similar to what they were able to do last year. No word on what date. They'll at least announce the official drop date for those new look City Connects, but I will certainly miss them. As far as the vibes in the clubhouse, I mean, everything was really solid. Guys washed 2024 off them. As Clint Hurdle says in his new book, Hurdleisms, you got to learn how to shower well, right? Like that's just a way of just kind of forgetting the previous game. And, I think the Rockies have somewhat of a devil may care attitude a little bit right now, knowing that a lot of people are predicting them to lose 100 games again or just be at the bottom of the NL West. And so, I don't necessarily think that is giving them any kind of chip on their shoulder. I think they just know, okay, you're counting us out. We're going to do everything that we're supposed to do to get ready for this season. And we are going to surprise because we're looking around the clubhouse and we really like a lot of the guys that we have. And I know we're not going to do a preview here, but I mean, I was just talking on the Bucko Banter podcast from Just Baseball Network about the rotation, and anyone outside of Denver is going to look at the starting five. That's not even including Chase Dolander. Looking at the starting five, going like, this rotation isn't good. And you go, well, as far as pitching at Coors Field is concerned, this actually I think is on paper a pretty decent rotation. And if everyone is around 4.5 ERA, again, not exciting. That's going to give you a chance to win ball games. If the starting pitcher at Coors Field goes 6 innings and throws only allows 3 earned runs, you're going into the 7th probably with a lead. And if not, you have a good chance to come back and win that ball game. And if you're around 500 at home, if not better, and you're going to be bad on the road, but even still, it's going to allow you for a big turnaround this year. So I think they're looking around and saying, like, we know we've got a lot of talent, and behind those guys that we are typically relying upon, we have some depth, some exciting young players that could provide us that boost that the Rockies frankly haven't had at all the last 2 years. When someone goes down, there's really nobody there to replace that guy. And so now that's kind of changed in a big way.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is often overlooked stat for Rockies pitching is that quality start of, can you make it through 6 and can you keep it 3 or under? And if you can, that's really all you're asking for. Like, no one's asking for a Rockies starting pitcher to go out and put up Cy Young numbers right off the bat. It's just not a thing that really happens. But a thing that a lot of, I think, people outside of the Colorado media market, they go, oh, well, it's the same rotation as the last couple years, and the Rockies rotation's been really bad. But it gets overlooked that this is the first time in 3 years that every member of that starting 5 in the rotation is reporting to camp healthy and ready to pitch. Like, it's been a while. And, from what I've seen so far, and we'll probably get in more detail about it later, it's like, people are looking pretty. Sensatela's looked sharp. Herman is still working on things, but he hasn't been bad at all. The big question mark right now is Austin Gomber, who was scratched from his appearance today with some shoulder soreness. But it also is a thing now, is there is more depth than we've had, where the last couple of years it's been, all right, well, these people are hurt and we've got basically nobody to pull from. What do we do?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's nice, because I think when we had Patrick on last year around this time, coming back, it seemed like the vibes in camp were kind of unexciting, so to speak. It kind of a shadow was hanging over them last year, and then it kind of carried. We saw what 2024 became as a year, but you can just look, like you're saying, that devil may care. Just is there a little bit more of that upbeat attitude that's been injected maybe from some of these younger players that are gaining that excitement, and like you're saying, not necessarily have with a chip on their shoulder, but are just approaching it knowing a lot of people are discounting them, counting them out, overlooking them, but they're just coming in to have fun and play ball. Can you tell that difference from last year to this year?
It definitely does feel that way, where last year, a lot of those same young faces, were there and were present in the big league clubhouse, but there was no real threat that they could make an impact on the roster. And you look at the AAA Albuquerque Isotopes and you go, Well, Sterling Thompson, Yankiel Fernandez, and Zach Veen, they all have yet to make their debut. And yet, if one of them got called up or all of them got called up by some point in May because of injuries, you'd go, okay, sure. Yeah, we're going to get 4+ months of all three of those guys. Now, again, that's not going to happen where all three of them are that's going to be the scenario where you have all three of your outfielders hurt, but you could rely upon those guys and see what you've got. So between that and the front office and the coaching staff, also a lot more willing to turn the keys over to those young players, that allows you that extra bit of hope that, okay, well, there's still going to be veterans that are going to be run out there, and probably more than you would like in various different instances. But you look at the 40-man, you don't have a ton of veteran guys that you can turn to then not feel good about. Because the thing that I keep coming back to is this idea that if they win 10 more games this season, and a majority of it is thanks to players that are going to be free agents or are going to be free agents at the end of next year, what benefit does that actually do for your future, right? So you could sign up for another 100 losses, but if you're getting all of the young guys playing, right? And again, if you're crafting kind of like worst case scenarios, and all right, Brenton Doyle misses a bulk of time, and maybe so does Ezekiel Tovar. Well, all right, that's going to definitely tamp down your win total. But if you're still able to, quote unquote, only lose 100 games in that instance, and you're getting a lot of contributions for young players that are going to be around for the next few years, losing 100 games versus losing 90 games would actually be better in that scenario. So I think there is that hope that, okay, this young group of guys are going to be together for a very long time. And this is the start of their window, which is going to coincide with the window of a Ryan Feltner's emergence, Brenton Doyle, Ezekiel Tovar, and a Michael Toglia taking a step forward. So that really bodes well for the future. Maybe not this year, maybe not even 2026, but certainly 2027 and beyond.
Nice. Is there any sort of vibe that the Rockies might make additional moves? There's been some things that they've done here. They brought in Scott Alexander very late. They just, and we'll talk about that more, they waived Justin Lawrence. And Jeff Criswell just had Tommy John is going to have Tommy John surgery. So there's going to be spots open, but also any sort of vibe that there might be additional moves in order to maybe clear a playing space for some of the younger guys, because we've talked about it on the show before that overall pretty much all of the starting positions except for corner outfield are set coming into camp. But that could change if the Rockies make any sort of moves during spring training, and they're no strangers to making trades during the spring.
Yeah, I'm really curious what they are going to do with their final bench spot, because obviously one of your four guys is going to be your backup catcher, Sam Hilliard, Kyle Farmer as your utility infielder, and we'll talk about him here in a little bit. And then question mark, right? Roster resource shows Greg Jones. Could be more of a veteran right-handed bat like a Sean Bouchard. Maybe that's where you stash a Zach Veen, where you're still able to give him somewhat regular starts and kind of go back and forth with Jordan Beck if you want to do a platoon, or he's a late inning defensive replacement or a late inning pinch runner to try to get you that extra base and move up an extra 90 feet. That's what will be really interesting. But it's a great question, Evan, because that was one thing that Buddy has said when I think it was even before the Scott Alexander acquisition, that, yeah, we're still looking for guys. And as teams are cutting players in camp, the Rockies are still looking for various upgrades. I mean, the Jake Cave trade came, right at the last minute, as, I think everyone was printing up their starting, roster and their opening day lineup and getting everything ready. And then all of a sudden, oh, there's this brand new player that's going to make the opening day roster that kind of changes the mathematics of everything of who's going where. So I think you very well could see something like that happening again, especially with that final bench spot kind of, a little bit, unsured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is the fun part, is where it seems like they're putting that focus on the young guys. We're seeing Jordan Beck and some of these younger guys getting plenty of time. Kyle Karros has gotten plenty of looks here in spring training. And it's nice to see some of these younger guys getting that good look in spring training. And honestly, a lot of these games that the Rockies are playing, these younger guys are making the impacts in these spring training games, where all of a sudden, there's all this excitement in the sixth inning on, because all the regulars are out, and The Zach Veens are in pimping big ol' bat flips, and Kyle Karros is ripping a double down the line, and Benny Montgomery's coming in for a pinch hit and hitting a double type of thing. Is that that's kind of what it seems like the Rockies messaging, like they're turning it to the youth. Bill Schmidt and Bud Black are on that point of we're going to see what these young guys have and how they fit into things. Is there a legitimate chance that maybe some of these young guys can crack through here pretty soon, earlier than maybe we think, or is it just getting them to know what they have in the depth while they focus on the regulars that we can expect opening day?
I think that's a fair question. I don't think it's a total change in philosophy. Like, someone like Kyle Karros is going to, magically all of a sudden go from high A to the majors in less than a year. I think there's a chance you could see somebody like him debut, because keep going back to Jordan Beck, how, he started 2023 in high A, and then he was able to debut early in 2024. A lot of that had to do with injuries, though, opening up that door. So the Rockies are definitely a lot more willing to give those opportunities to those young players. But, I still tend to think that they probably are giving a little more opportunities, for lack of a better term, or just leaning on the veteran guys. I don't want to say more than they should, but it is a long season, and I think they are, right to probably be worried about that. I keep going back to, I think it was 2018 when everyone was banging the drum to turn the keys over to Raimel Tapia and David Dahl, and say, hey, maybe you get rid of Gerardo Parra and Carlos Gonzalez. And, you saw it both. You needed all four of those guys. But if you cast off Gerardo Parra and Carlos Gonzalez, then your only options are Tapia and Dahl, and there's nobody behind them to replace them. So it's better to have that depth and say, all right, we'll start with the older guys for right now. And when we need those younger guys, or when those younger guys are ready, then we'll slowly start to make that switch. So that's, that's just, being cautious and trying to guard against, the risk that comes with guys getting injured. So there is some of that, I think, going on with that roster construction, but they're very much willing to give those opportunities to those young guys in the second half of the season.
Yeah. And what I'll say is, I will say for some of these guys, it probably is a little more playing time than they should be getting already. We've seen a lot of Nick Martini so far this spring, and I can't help but feel like he is probably going to make this opening day roster in that final bench spot, just because of how he's performed. Bud Black seems to really like him. And it's not that he's had a bad spring. He's having a pretty good spring, all things considered. But you look at his track record, and you look at, other people you could be giving the opportunities, and you go, this feels like Jake Cave all over again. But then at the same time, you look at some of the younger guys getting a decent chunk of playing time, and you go, well, these probably aren't 2025 guys, but 2026, you definitely could. There was a very short-lived rumor a couple weeks ago that was from a completely unreliable source that spread around for a hot minute. That was the Milwaukee Brewers and the Colorado Rockies are in trade talks for sending Ryan McMahon to Milwaukee. And, pretty much anyone with common sense was like, it's interesting to think about, but probably not going to happen. But with how much playing time, Kyle Karros has gotten and how well he's done during that playing time, it does make you think about what the future could be after Ryan McMahon, if there is an after Ryan McMahon anytime soon. Because, Ryan McMahon's still not going to be here forever, even if he is here through the entirety of his contract. And you look at it and you can see, okay, well, here's who we've got. And at the same time, if Nick Martini is on the opening day roster and he does really well and the Rockies trade him, then I go, great, sounds awesome. Like we did with Mike Moustakas the other year. And it's the same thing with Scott Alexander I really did not like the move for Scott Alexander at first, because I want this to be giving the young guys as many chances as possible. But you sign Scott Alexander to a low risk, high reward deal. And if at the trade deadline, he's been doing great, you trade him and you get more assets. And that is at least one thing the Rockies have done fairly well at, not making as many moves as we would like them to, but they have offloaded guys to bring in more talent. I mean, that's how we got Luis Peralta last year, and look how good that's turned out so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Just interesting to think about the whole roster construction, because like we're saying, we pretty much know what the roster is going to be come opening day. Maybe one or two surprises in here that we'll talk about in a second after the break. But just the cycling through, and I think it goes back to just figuring out what we have depth-wise and who can they turn to should something happen to one of these big league guys. I think that's an important part of spring training too, is, you figuring out who's going to be on your big league roster, but then well, who's going to be our second string, our reinforcements when the time comes that somebody goes down or something happens and we need to call a guy up. If Jordan Beck struggles, who do we replace him with when we have to option him down to get some time? Well, Zach Veen can come up, that type of thing. So it's fun to have these questions about the future in spring training, and we'll touch on a couple of more of these. But first, we'll take a quick break here on Affected by Altitude. We're joined by Patrick Lyons, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. Skyler Timmons, Evan Lang, with our good buddy Patrick Lyons here. Patrick, here's the big question I think a lot of people have is, will Chase Dollander crack the opening day roster? He's made 2 appearances here in spring training. He's given up 3 home runs. So he's had one good start, 2 innings. Second start, he got roughed up a little bit, but he settled in nicely by the end of his start. But that's been the question of, will the Rockies legitimately give him that opportunity if he's earned it to put on the opening day roster? Or is it he's probably going to start down in AAA or something? What do you make of Chase Dollander so far?
I'm going to give you, because I'm a radio guy, the most long-winded answer I could possibly give you. So here we go. Well, yeah. So it was interesting to hear the Rockies say that they are going to give their top pitching prospect every opportunity to make a starting rotation, where there's 5 guys already that have fairly proven track records with, Tommy John surgery aside, they've got those solid track records, and a couple of them trending upwards, Gomber before, his injury, but upward trajectory on his 2024, obviously same for Ryan Feltner, and Kyle Freeland was really solid once he came back from the 60-day IL. So I thought it might've been perhaps just a little bit of lip service to have a good story out there. And, in interviewing Chase Dollander over on Blake Street Banner, he said, I could have a 0 ERA and I might still have some things to work on. And of course, the red flag goes up of like, well, that might actually happen, which feels like it would be a typical Rockies thing to do. The conspiracy part of my brain said, well, maybe that means one of their 5 starters in the rotation they already know is probably banged up and might not be ready to start the season, or is going to be unlikely to start the season. And so when weighing your options, you pretty much already knew that there was going to be a spot opened up for a young starter, and Dollander probably has the best chops of any of them. Truth be told, I think everyone is looking pretty healthy in the starting rotation. And despite the fact that Chase Dollander does have a 7 ERA, the things that people are saying in the Rockies front office and in the Rockies coaching staff sound just like they did in the offseason. It sounds like they love this guy's stuff. They love his makeup, his slider, his changeup, curveball. I mean, they're almost all elite. Like, they're fantastic. Seeing him in person in that start against the Giants last Monday was incredible. There was definite buzz and everyone exchanging glances. 3-pitch strikeout of Lamont Wade Jr. That's a good professional hitter right there. Sure, gives up the home run to Jung-Hoo Lee. You go and look at what his performance was like on Saturday, where gives up a 3-run home run to Eugenio Suarez. But if you look at the play that transpired just before that, should have been a 4-6-3 inning-ending double play, so he wouldn't have faced that. That being said, you got to go out there and get your outs. If the defense doesn't, how are you going to deal with that? He got beat by Eugenio Suarez on a really good pitch that Dollander did like on the inner part of the plate. He thought it was a great pitch, but he got beat by a really good hitter. And he has this next pitch mentality, which for any Rockies fan listening to this podcast, when hopefully they are, that's the exact mentality you need to have. Mm-hmm. If you're a Rockies pitcher, is don't worry about the pitch you just threw, worry about the next one. right? Don't worry about the home run you just gave up. Worry about the next one you're trying to prevent. So he has this, very much, sagacious mind about himself. He's wise beyond his years, and he's not just saying the right things. He really is embodying those things. And in talking with him, he really believes it. It's not just, I gotta say the same things that I'm supposed to say. He really does believe that. And so despite the fact that he's been taken deep 3 times in 2 starts, he's, appreciative of the opportunity that he's getting. He's learning from it. And even after that 3-run first inning, was able to rebound for 2 solid innings after that. So he continues to lengthen out. And I do think right now, if I had to guess, he will be in the starting rotation for the Rockies on the day after opening day, March 28th against the Rays.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me because, like, what a lot of people are talking about is, the 3 home runs. But what people aren't talking about as much is that in his 5 innings of work, he leads the team right now with 7 strikeouts, and he's only walked 1 batter. He pounds the strike zone. And it's like you said, he's got that, all right, next pitch, let's go mentality. He's got the mental toughness that you really do need to pitch at altitude, to pitch for the Rockies. It's a tough place to pitch. It's a tough team to pitch on. And he never really, and I know it's spring training, but like, he gave up that bomb to Eugenio Suarez, and he didn't really seem to linger on it or beat himself up about it. It was okay, next pitch. And it was a good pitch to Eugenio, and he just got punished because that's what Eugenio Suarez does. He's a good hitter. Like, he strikes out a lot, yes, but he will also take advantage of any opportunity to demolish a baseball. And for me, like, just looking at his body of work so far, I see no reason why you shouldn't have Chase Dollander on that opening day roster. Like, I can already think of 1,000 different moves you could make to facilitate that. Mm-hmm. And whether it's Gomber's maybe more hurt than they're letting on, or whether it's just, okay, well, let's move one of these guys to long relief or rock a 6-man rotation or something. You've got to at this point. Like, I do not want to see Chase Dollander start the season in AAA. I want him on this roster. And that's not just you've got to let the young guys play, because of course that's part of it. It is, I like what I see, and what I see I think is ready for the show.
And that doesn't benefit anybody to go to AAA in the Pacific Coast League. That feels like a punishment, right? So if anything, err on the side of, let him get knocked around a little bit in the majors in a worst case scenario for a few starts, but no, you're a big leaguer. Now go down to AAA and work on a couple things, and we'll have you back up, versus go to AAA, do your normal stuff. Okay, you've got a 5 ERA, but you've been better than what your ERA might suggest, and maybe lose a little bit of the confidence. Maybe you lose a little bit of momentum. He doesn't need to go back to AA Hartford. So I think it's jumping on that potential, that momentum of like, okay, we're going to keep you in the rotation, and then if it doesn't work out, that's okay. That's better than what you just said of, hey, let's go down to AAA Albuquerque. That doesn't seem like it would work out for anybody there. And
I've always been on the side of, sometimes it's better to skip AAA for some prospects, and they've done it before. Herman did not spend that much time in AAA. Antonio Senzatela skipped AAA entirely. Is that when you play in the PCL and you play in Albuquerque, where the ball just flies, that's not going to be necessarily productive, and it could, like you said, it could hurt your confidence, versus you're coming in now into spring and they're telling you have every shot to make this team. You don't want to harm that. You don't want to damage that.
Yeah. And that's what I like looking at. It's nice that it's fun that we can have this conversation about more than just Dollander too, because Bradley Blaylock has looked good in spring so far. Gabriel Hughes has looked good. No, he's not necessarily fighting for the opening day spot, but it's just looking healthy. He's looking good. So there's a couple of these trio of younger guys, younger pitchers that are looking good and making that argument where it's hard to argue to not have any of them in the starting rotation for opening day, which is a good spot a good problem to have more options and fewer spots that are all doing good, because even your staples, Kyle Freeland's looking good. Herman and Senzatella both looking good. Ryan Feltner is still generally looking good. So you have all these options that are looking good enough at the moment. where there's going to be that tough decision maybe come opening day of maybe we do just break through and put Dollander on there. And I think it helps that the Rockies maybe have had that conversation with Kyle Freeland, Austin Gomber, that Bill Schmidt said, like, hey, the 5 best guys are going to be in that rotation for opening day. And even though we all believe it's pretty much set, there's that window where a Blaylock, a Dollander could manage to break through for that opening day roster.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's like Bradley Blaylock's been pretty impressive, honestly, this spring. But of the two, I would pick Chase Dollander every day. And I do like what the Rockies has said, where it's like, if Dollander's on the big league roster, he's not in the bullpen. He is a rotation pitcher through and through. And I think what also helps that is that there's been multiple guys in the bullpen so far this spring that are, turning heads and making you think, now is this guy an option to have on the opening day roster? And for me, one of those guys right now is Zach Agnos, where it's like, I look at how he's pitched so far and I go, I wouldn't be against him being on that opening day bullpen, especially with some spaces clearing up. Because one of the things that I really like what the Rockies are doing so far is that almost everybody in camp who's played above high A seems to have at least a shot in some regard. And, they had their first slate of guys that they sent down to minor league camp. And the guys they sent down were all guys who nobody expected them to really be on that opening day roster. You had Tommy Doyle, who was signed to a minor league contract. That's not a surprise. Sean Sullivan, who hasn't pitched yet because he's still recovering from that hip surgery. Not a surprise at all. The 2 catchers, Bryant Betancourt and Ronica Palma, pretty much no expectation that they were going to make the opening day roster. And then Julio Carreras. So it's like everybody who's still with the big league camp is a guy who still has an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And we can shift gears here, moving on from talking about Dollander and all those younger guys. We can transition over into the bullpen because this is the big spot where Justin Lawrence was waived. Kind of surprisingly, but it seemed like it was just a matter of time after that good 2023, then really struggles in 24, and then struggled here in the early part of camp. What was your reactions or when you heard the news, Patrick, about, and what do you make of Justin Lawrence being waived by the Rockies? He's not off the team technically at the moment. He's still working on stuff. Could be, we don't know if he's going to be claimed or not. But just what do you make of that news?
I was pretty surprised because this is just a time of year where players don't typically get waived like this, right? Unless you just don't even see it right now at all, period, right? I mean, later on in spring, those are the kind of moves that happen where you say, well, look, this guy doesn't have any options, which Justin Lawrence did not. And you say, well, and we want to create room for a Zach Agnos. So we got to make that swap, but we're still 3 weeks, plus away from that. Mm-hmm. So that was, I thought, rather strange. They were able to agree to $975,000, for his contract for this year. And I really thought that, he went into the off season and did what he needed to do and came back and was definitely saying the right things when I spoke with him while I was down here, down in Arizona. Got the haircut, right? So, I mean, he's definitely trying to shower well and get rid of, everything that happened in 2024. And he was going to, be one of the more veteran guys in that bullpen, along with Kinley and then Scott Alexander. After that, he had, really the most service time of any of the relievers not named Jimmy Herget, right? So he had plenty of experience and still, a lot of upside. So it just seemed like a big surprise. But when you look at, as Evan pointed out, a lot of these young, exciting relievers, that gives you depth. And those young guys also have roster flexibility because they can be optioned back and forth to the minors, which Lawrence would be clogging a spot up, in that bullpen to do that. So that was a big piece. And then also, the emergence of one of the non-roster invites in Diego Castillo, who seems like he is now more likely than not going to get one of those roster spots. So, you're basically swapping out Justin Lawrence for Diego Castillo. And as you pointed out, Skyler, Lawrence could still be within the organization if nobody claims him on waivers in the next less than 24 hours.
Yeah. By the time by the time people are listening to this episode on Monday, we will probably know the fate of Justin Lawrence.
Yeah. And I like that because it's one of those instances the Rockies making a quote unquote hard decision that maybe they wouldn't typically move. They could have easily just, well, Justin Lawrence, we like him and we think he can bounce back, go back to his 2023 form. So we'll just hold on to him and hope he can recover. But the fact that they're being a little bit more proactive here in spring training, like I said, this early on, no, I think it was pretty early on in spring training, they brought back Sam Hilliard, but even that was like halfway through spring training or so. But to drop Lawrence, and no, I think there's still a good pitcher in there, but it's just not working out in Colorado, it seems, anymore, where he had that really good year, but then last year he really struggled, and then that command is just continuing to elude him, or at least the consistency of his command. So it makes it when you have so many other guys performing well, like a Diego Castillo, who's only made a couple of appearances, but he's looked good. He's done what he can. Another veteran trying to rebound to what he was before some struggles, but that there's so many options, you can't afford to hold on to everybody when there are better options perhaps available.
You know, on one hand, you look and say he'd probably be a great candidate to go somewhere else, just to have a change of scenery, work with somebody new. That would really benefit him. And then on the other hand, if he's not getting, new scenery, then, how is he going to make those changes? How is he going to improve? Well, at the same time, the Rockies may be seeing an opportunity that they can have their cake and eat it too. Like we still value Justin Lawrence, but with the struggles that he's having right now, coupled with, his season in 2024 and the fact that, maybe we had some conversations with other teams and we really didn't get any bites on him. You know what? We might be able to sneak him through waivers. So we can do that where we still have Justin Lawrence in a spot in which we don't have to carry him on the opening day roster. And then we can then, give that roster spot to somebody else. So could be a little of them seeing that opportunity to, again, have their cake and eat it too by sliding him through waivers at this time in the spring training.
It's kind of like what they did with Aaron Schunk, where instead of optioning him or whatever, they DFA'd him, preserved his options, snuck him through waivers, and he's still with the organization. And it's a bummer because for Justin Lawrence, I really do think the organization has not done him a ton of favors in terms of his development. There was the weirdness where, especially during his 2023 season, he was doing really well, but he was legitimately overused. And we saw Jake Bird struggle to bounce back from overuse in 2024. And the bouncing back and forth between AAA and the Rockies for a bit in 2021 and 2022, when maybe you could have been giving him more of an actual shot. But at the same time, his 2020, you cannot say that he was not given a lot of opportunities in 2024. He had 50-something appearances. And just so far this spring, I feel like we haven't seen enough. And when he's got all these walks, when he's got multiple hit batters, he's struggled with the command, which has been the long going issue. I know it's early, but I still think this is the best option for both Lawrence and the team, because if he gets picked up on waivers, great. Another team is going to give him a shot and see what they can fix and tweak, give him that change of scenery. And if he doesn't, then he gets outrighted and still gets a shot to keep working on things, is still with a big league organization, and can maybe try and make a comeback later on. But when you have all these other guys that you potentially need the roster spot for, it's the right decision. And he might not even be outrighted. He could, now with the injury to Jeff Criswell, they could be, all right, well, he cleared waivers, but we need someone on the roster, so we're going to keep him. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Skyler, I want to get Evan's reaction. Evan, what if I were to tell you that Justin Lawrence did get picked up and it's by the Tampa Bay Rays? What's your reaction?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Do you think he's going to be an all-star this year or next year? Tampa's just that one team, right?
That or the Dodgers.
Dodgers,
Did this just happen?
No.
Okay, because that's happened before.
It was hypothetical, but I wanted to get your reaction.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all, because the Rays are a kind of team who would see this guy who they would not have to give a lot of money to and go, there is raw stuff there that we can tweak and tap into. that'd be probably a really good fit for him.
Mm-hmm.
The Rays are now becoming what the Yankees were a couple years ago, where they're loading up on all the Rockies. They got Coco Montez, Connor Siebold, Hunter Stovall, and we'll see if Lawrence ends up there. But he would be a problem in Tampa Bay, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would figure it out.
And potentially, though, because the Rays have picked up other former Rockies top prospects and had it not work out. Ben Bowden was with them for a little bit.
Yeah. It's that bullpen, the way it's shaping up, it's going to be interesting to see. And, the outside chance a Jeffrey Yan somehow leaps his way onto the roster, both literally and metaphorically. Patrick, what was it like watching him just leap up into the air in person? Was there like an audible like Mario jump, like boing?
It was fun. It definitely was. I'll say that there was one point when he came into the game, and I was in the clubhouse, and there were a lot of relievers that were watching his performance and noticing like, 6 straight balls, that he threw to walk, and then his 7th pitch, he ends up getting a double play, and then someone else coming in who had just gotten some work in said, I want to see him strike somebody out. I want him to see him do the jump split. So everyone was kind of excited. He's been scaling that back on the backfields. He hasn't shown that. It's only in game only. Mm-hmm. So, the guys were kind of excited. They're like, hey, this guy's gonna be my teammate. I want to see him succeed, and I want to see him do the jump split.
I really like what he's definitely not perfect. Like you said, the six straight balls and, walking a guy, but overall he's not been bad. Like there's a lot to like there. He had a great outing today. So he's carrying a 0 ERA and I think 4 appearances at this point. Like he's getting it done to the point where you could go, I could see him making the team, and it would be fun. I'd enjoy it.
I think down in Albuquerque, he would be the mayor of Albuquerque.
Yeah,
they would adore him.
He would be great there. I mean, him and Yankiel Fernandez. You'd have 2 Yan Mans, which would then be Yan Men, but it doesn't sound as nice. But yeah, they'd have their plenty of Yans down there in Albuquerque.
Yeah, but yeah, you got doors are opening, these windows are opening, and we'll see what the Rockies do because Criswell goes on the 60-day, whenever, sometime soon. They'll place him on the 60 days since he's getting the Tommy John. So there's an open roster spot. If they take Lawrence off, there's another 60-man spot or 40-man spot open where Castillo could put on. A Dollander can take a spot. Who knows what happens, Gumber? Maybe it's worse than maybe we think. And then if he has to go miss an extended amount of time, there's another spot open. So the depth already being tested maybe a little bit, but there's opportunities and players forcing the issue, which is what you always want to see, especially with those young relievers, guys forcing the issue of forcing the Rockies to make decisions. And like, they give them an offer they can't refuse.
Give them an offer they can't refuse.
That's not bad. That wasn't bad.
Why are you surprised by my impressions, Evan?
I don't know.
That was a pretty good Island of Dr. Moreau impression of Marlon Brando. I like that.
Yeah, there you go. But we'll take another quick break here and rounding things out here. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on Affected by Altitude.
Your reaction, Evan.
It wasn't bad.
That was a great reaction.
Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. Skyler, Timmons, Evan Lang here with Patrick Lyons talking Rockies in spring training. And before we hit on our player projection, Evan, any other thoughts of things that we need to touch on here in spring training, or anything, Patrick, that's been on your mind coming out of spring training?
I can start with Chris Bryant's bat speed. There has been a noticeable uptick in Chris Bryant's bat speed so far this spring. And that's something we were talking about, is that if he's healthy and he needs to make an impact on this team, his bat speed, which was one of the slowest, needed to pick up. And he got on that home run he hit the other day. He had a bat speed of 70-something miles per hour, which is 77 miles per hour, which is significantly higher than we were looking at in any of his appearances last year.
That that happened on Tuesday's game because that's when I was driving back from Scottsdale, and that fueled me for about 3 hours. The back and forth. Where did this come from? Because there's no StatCast for this game. Okay, let me pull over and send out a couple texts. Let's get some more information about this. And it was really interesting. And, when was the last time that he hit a ball that hard? Oh, 2016. Who was it against? Ubaldo Jimenez. Okay, that's interesting. Well, when was the last time he hit a ball 462 feet that wasn't at Coors Field? Well, he did do it once against Jeff Hoffman in 2016, who was a member of the Rockies, and only done it one other time, that being like his 7th ever home run. And it was against the Nationals, Aaron Barrett. So you're right. Like, even a glimpse of vintage KB provides a lot of hope, because I think one of the things that the Rockies need this season is the middle of the order to be sound, to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got Michael Toglia there with that 30 home run power. Okay, great. Nolan Jones, you have to hope, at least right now, where he's kind of maybe positioned around as the 6th hitter, you have to hope that, okay, if maybe he can replicate 2023 even just a little bit, even if he just, brushes up against 20 home runs, that's still, progress. It's still promise. But if Chris Bryant is now hitting 20 home runs, which he's only at 17 so far in his tenure with the Rockies, that's now the top 6 guys in your order potentially hitting 20 home runs. And if Hunter Goodman is playing regularly, he's got 20 home run power. Tyro Estrada, I don't know if he'll be able to reach that point, but you could legitimately have 7 guys with 20 plus home runs. And I didn't even mention Zach Veen or Jordan Beck. Jordan Beck's the guy that would probably more likely than not hit that 20. So 8 guys with 20 or more home runs, probably a stretch, but you could see, 6 of those guys do it. And if you can get 20 plus out of Bryant, Toglia, and Nolan Jones in the middle of that order, behind, 3 of your best hitters in McMahon, Doyle, and Tovar, again, all of a sudden now you're feeling a lot better about not losing 100 games.
Yeah. I missed my opportunity to say it, but what does Real Big Fish have to do with any of this?
You got me on that reference.
You said Chris Bryant with that hard hit ball against Aaron Barrett. Aaron Barrett is also the name of the lead singer of Real Big Fish.
All right. Sorry, I didn't sell out for that reference.
Hi-oh.
Ska will never die.
Got it. That was a buzzer beater, Evan. Come on.
Interesting point here on Chris Bryant. 4 games he's played, all have been as the DH. He hasn't played positional in the field yet.
Which is exactly what needs to happen. Like, I got so tired of it. He'll play some first base, he'll play some right field. No. Stop it. So you want to get out the spray bottle and be like, tss, tss, tss. But Patrick, you also brought up a guy in that list of guys with the light tower power. Is I think another guy we need to talk about here on this show today is Nolan Jones, and when we need to start being a little bit worried. I was having this conversation yesterday where at what point do you think he's playing himself off of the opening day roster, because he's not hitting at all. He just got his first hit of spring training, yesterday. He's 1 for like 18 or 19 right now. No extra base hits. He's played some solid defense. He made a cool diving catch today, but he's not playing well to start, and it's a concern.
I think it's a good podcast question. I'll say that, right? And that's what we're doing here. But I think we've got a way to go before we worry about Nolan Jones in that capacity, or at least worrying about him to the extent that he's going to play himself off the roster, because I don't really see anybody who's playing their way onto the roster. Again, this is a guy who's been in the majors the last 2 years, still is every bit the 4th place finisher for the NL Rookie of the Year award in 2023. So, and as you mentioned, with the defense, as good as it is, you could almost liken it to a Ryan McMahon. Now, Ryan McMahon is a little bit different because of what he's able to do at the plate. Even when he's not, hitting fairly well, he's going to take his share of pitches, which is great. But what he provides on defense, nobody else on the Rockies roster can do that in third base. Mm-hmm. You could argue that nobody else can play a left field quite like Nolan Jones with his, his range ability continuing to improve, but that cannon that he's got out there alongside Brenton Doyle, like that provides a lot of value. So considering, the Yankiel Fernandez and Zach Veen, sure, we know they've got a ton of upside, but they've yet to even play one game in the majors. So that makes me a little hesitant to say that those guys would be the solution. Sean Bouchard's also there, but you're not going to get a ton of upside there. The defenses can be a little bit rough in the corners. So I think it definitely is something to keep an eye on for sure. I would be really surprised if anything happened where, he doesn't start on the opening day roster. I don't think he needs to go back to AAA and necessarily work on anything. Could he start on the 15-day IL? Is he playing through something right now? Is that part of it? I could see that, but I think that's a fair podcast question to have out at this point in spring. Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair.
I mean, and I love Nojo, and I want him to succeed, but I am sitting here, and I know it's way too early because, like you said, we're hosting a show here. At this point, for offensively, would take Zach Veen and put him on the opening day roster because he's hitting well. He's passing all the eye tests for me. But like you said, way too early. We got almost a full month until opening day. And, there's plenty of other guys to be asking these questions about. Like, you can ask the question about Jordan Beck and if he should be on the opening day roster because he's also having a little bit of a rough spring. And then you combine that with the fact that, Yankiel Fernandez and Zach Veen are both having pretty fabulous springs so far. Yankiel Fernandez, surprisingly, one of the hit leaders on the team right now, early in spring. But you combine that with their, defensive things like Yankiel Fernandez has never been known as an incredible defensive outfielder versus Nolan Jones probably could have won the Gold Glove in 2023 if he had met the innings requirement.
Yeah, it's one of those things like you're saying, Patrick. You become more concerned the closer opening day gets. If it's like the day before and he's hitting like 0.25, he's only had the one hit, and with a ton of strikeouts, you're like, ugh, maybe not. But there's still plenty of time in spring training, and I think Evan and I we talked about this last week where there's some guys you give a little bit more leeway, even with like the opening day roster guys that you can pretty much guarantee will be there. They get a little bit more leeway because they're working on stuff. Whereas a Zach Veen and even a Sean Bouchard, those guys are playing for a spot. They're trying to make a name for themselves in spring training. So every at bat counts for them. Whereas a Nolan Jones, maybe a Jordan Beck, you can step back a little bit with the expectation. Okay, maybe he's just working on something. He's made good a swing there. He made contact. That's good. He drew some walks. He's got 5 strikeouts in a little bit. So, yeah, the hits aren't coming, but he's not looking absolutely awful up there. So, spring training's always messes with your brain stat-wise.
Well, it's because your brain wants to go, I'm watching baseball. This is important. But then that's the lizard part of your brain. And the regular part of your brain is going, none of this matters. None of this is actually important in the grand scheme of things. And it's the same thing as like, you talk about the guys who you don't really have to worry about. It's like you're Ryan McMahon. Ryan McMahon's had a little bit of a slow start, but he's working on things. And some of the other pitchers, they're messing with deliveries, they're messing with mechanics, they're trying new pitches. We saw Tyler Kinley throw a weird curveball. That was new. Like, it's tough because my brain wants to go sound the alarm about Nolan Jones. But then you got to take a step back and think, do you actually need to sound the alarm bells?
You need to unplug the alarm, right? We should be plugging in any alarms at this point of the spring. And like you said, you get excited about certain things and say, oh, the Rockies are atop the Grapefruit League table as far as wins and winning percentage. And that looks good and exciting. But, how many of those were late inning wins where you're really talking about the Yard Goats won that game or the Isotopes won that game. So, win-loss record in spring means nothing.
Yeah, like the Rockies, as we're recording, the Rockies are playing Seattle down at Salt River Field, Talking Stick. And in the 8th inning, they just put up a 5 spot. And who's responsible for that? Well, it's Benny Montgomery, Zach Veen, Sterling Thompson, Adele Amador, Yankiel Fernandez, and Kyle Karros.
Owen Miller. Come on. RBI sacrifice fly. Let's go give him a little credit.
Right. One last thing before we move into our last thing, talking about projections here for one of our players. Of the position players, non-roster guys, who do you think would have the biggest chance of, the most likelihood of making the opening day roster? We just mentioned Owen Miller, Keston Hiura's in camp, Austin Nola, Nick Martini, who we've mentioned before. Of some of these guys, do any of them stick out to you of this guy's a legitimate shot of making the opening day roster, or no, they're just kind of these depth veterans that every team has every year that are just kind of playing for a job maybe somewhere else even?
Yeah, I none of them really stand out. I mean, Owen Miller is the only one because, he's a utility infielder, and I think Kyle Farmer could probably play a little outfield, and if Miller was staying in the infield, and with everything that the Rockies have been talking about, load management, this idea of getting their starting infield more days off and the outfield as well, because the season is a grind, and allowing them to play closer to 150 games than, playing a majority of the first 140 and then having to go on the IL, for the final, 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season. You don't want that. So let's keep guys a little bit fresher. So in order to do that, Kyle Farmer is in many ways going to be, locked in for almost 450 at bats, because he's going to be, running around playing every single position. And then you go, oh, okay, maybe I understand why they paid a premium for a utility guy like him than going with a guy who's making the league minimum in Aaron Schunk. So if Farmer's going to the outfield and starting at third base on certain days, you still might need to give Tyro Estrada a day off. And so that's where an Owen Miller type, a true utility infielder, would fit in. So that last spot on the bench is going to be really interesting to see how Bud Black goes about using it. But if you're thinking about Kyle Farmer being, the opposite of the designated hitter, he's the designated fielder when someone needs a day off. That means he plays a lot. And then you don't have another, infielder on your bench other than the guy who's getting the day off, right? So that would make me tend to think that maybe Owen Miller has a leg up on some of those other guys.
Yeah, I'd be surprised though if it's probably only going to be like one of these non-roster invites is going to get one of these spots. My money is right now on Nick Martini, because then you have a backup first baseman and you can avoid having Chris Bryant need to play first base or in the outfield, because Martini can also play left and right field. It's where I'd prefer to see him as sort of a fifth outfielder and DH kind of guy. I can't see right now Keston Hiura or Owen Miller, these guys who are not on the 40, making the opening day roster. I think the Rockies like Keston Hiura, and there is stuff to like there, but my bet is he starts the year with the AAA Albuquerque Isotopes if he stays with the organization after spring training.
Yeah, it's kind of a tie. It's between Owen Miller and Nick Martini. And I think, Patrick, you bring up that good point of them just maybe having an extra utility infielder, that can really truly play second base and flip around, while Kyle Farmer can run all over the place as needed. Because, hey, there may be times when two of those guys in that infield need a day off. So who knows? But yeah, interesting stuff. And that brings up a nice transition into Kyle Farmer. He's going to be the next guy on our player projections. And if you've been following us over these last couple of months, we've been just talking about these guys running over their Fangraphs projections. And old Kyle Farmer coming in at age 34. That's not his projected age. That's his actual age. They project him to be 34 years old. But over the season, Fangraphs, across the board, Zips has him in at 119 games. Everything else probably between 60 and 80 games, somewhere in there, like you'd expect out of a utility guy. Average around 250, a 310 on base, 386 slugging. They're mostly being worth anywhere between 0.2 and 0.5 FWAR, 9 home runs, 29. So not a lot of, across the board, not really a whole lot to be ecstatic about offensively. But like we mentioned, it seems like the projection is this is just going to be a solid utility guy that can just plug and play throughout the season.
Yeah, he's sort of a true super utility guy, because remember, you can even ask him to put on catcher's gear if you need him to. The thing I like about Farmer's projections is that it's sort of been in line with my thoughts on the guy is he played through a bunch of last year hurt. and had a terrible season overall. Started to pick back up in the second half after he was fully recovered, but basically a career worst season for him. And all of his projections from Zips to Steamer to Basic Fangraphs has him basically reverting to where he had been over the last few seasons. Hitting in the 250s. He can hit double-digit home runs, but probably not going to get to 20. He'll get some RBIs. He'll get a small handful of steals. He is basically, in terms of hitting, where end-of-career Charlie Blackmon was. And you can do a lot worse than that for a guy with that positional versatility, whereas, Chuck really couldn't play the outfield that much anymore. Farmer's still got that, and he's a couple of years younger than Charlie Blackmon. That I feel like it's going to be an okay fit. I've softened on the move overall since we picked him up, but I really did not like it at the time. But I do get where they are coming from, and he is, by all accounts, an excellent clubhouse presence, and that super utility ability of his will play well.
It's funny how you brought up Charlie Blackmon and his numbers. There is a void right now in the Rockies clubhouse in terms of leadership, right? And how much is Ryan McMahon going to step up? Doyle wants to. What does that actually look like? Tovar would like to do the same. I mean, we're talking about a 23-year-old kid here, so that can only go so far. So, what is Kyle Farmer going to provide besides a day of respite for the infield when they need a day off? Well, he's going to provide a little bit of leadership too, and some postseason experience, because he's been on some pretty good teams when he was with the Dodgers, and one of those Twins teams, I believe, made the postseason. So, he does have a little bit of that going for him, and that can be something that the Rockies clubhouse as a whole benefits from, versus or rather than just an on-field presence. So has that super utility ability. Also, as you said, he's a catcher, but he's actually, in the last 3 or 4 years, he's pitched more than he's caught. So he does have that in his bag. He does have a pitcher's mitt. Whatever that looks like.
Legitimately, a literal super utility, and that he has played everywhere at least once.
Do you guys might know this? Were the Rockies the only team last year to not use a position player to pitch? I don't know the answer to that, but they didn't. They definitely refused to.
I don't think they were the only one, but yeah, well, because they did it a couple times in 2023.
Yeah, I think it was Trejo and Brian Serven, maybe.
Trejo did it twice, I think.
I don't know.
So is this a sign that they're willing to go back and utilize a position player pitching?
Probably not, because I know Bud Black hates it.
Well, if you don't want to worry about it, just play better.
It's better. Try to do better than you are currently doing, and also please win. Thank you.
Don't give up 20 runs. But yeah, but there's not a whole lot to talk about with Kyle Farmer, and we've touched on it already. So wanted to get one more guy in here, but yeah, just that good veteran presence. I think that's kind of the expectation, and play good defense, and then bring in a quality bat. I think that was the main point. I think, like you mentioned before, Patrick, of bringing in a premium utility guy, of a reliable bat you can plug in when when a Tovar takes a day off. Somehow you can still have a reliable bat there and glove. Because in the past, it's, well, Alan Trejo's filling in. He's a good defender. That bat leaves a lot to be desired. Same with Aaron Schunk, more or less, or a Garrett Hampson in the past. Sorry, Evan, but it's true with Garrett Hampson. Wasn't bringing much offensively. But some of these guys that the Rockies have carried on a bench, even when they come in late in the game, they're just not hitting. And so here's Kyle Farmer, who could come in, draw a walk. He's not going to strike out as much, like career 20% strikeout rate. So maybe in pinch hit situations late in games too, that's a reliable bat off the bench. But not too shabby for old Kyle Farmer.
For what it's worth, Garrett Hampson is having a pretty good spring with the Diamondbacks this year. I just want to put that out there. I don't want you to do my boy dirty like that. I want him so badly to make a big league roster. He's my boy.
Hey, the last two teams he played with went to the playoffs.
It's true.
Skyler,
he was even kind of important in the playoffs.
Maybe this is an every Rockies ever topic, but figure out on opening day roster, because you never know what the roster looks like on June 12th, right?
Mhm.
But opening day rosters, or even just teams in general, where the first 6 letters of 2 players' names were the same. Oh, no, not 6. Sorry, 5. You can edit this out. Kyle F. and Kyle F.
There you go.
Riveting stuff here.
But moving on from Kyle Farmer,
Please.
I just love those transitions. Patrick gives me nothing to work with in the segue. Like, I don't know what to do with it.
Spelling's hard.
It is.
Speaking of guys whose first names have 4 or less letters in them,
Samuel Hilliard. Real quick here, we'll touch on Sam Hilliard before we close things out here. Sam Hilliard took on an interesting role last season where he becomes the more or less just the 4th outfielder off the bench, had a good start to the season in AAA, comes up halfway and really came into his own, had a good solid year, 239 average, 305 on base, 507 slugging. He had 10 homers that he got across in 58 games, 27 ribbies. Yeah, the strikeouts are still a major problem with old Sam Hilliard, but hey, who is it not a problem for with the Rockies these days? But coming into 2025, it seems like, I guess the assumption, Patrick, is that he's going to be the 4th outfielder again, but it still feels like there's maybe some of that hint of, well, he could be the starting left field or starting right fielder in place of Jordan Beck or one of these other guys. But numbers wise, it's more of the same, like the 230 average or 22 slugging. He'll hit maybe 10 plus home runs. He's got that in him, depending on how much he plays. But Fangraph showing like 57 to 70 games, somewhere in there. So those classic numbers. But is that the role he's going to play, or will we see more of Sam Hilliard starting in right field or left field, somewhere in the outfield, more than maybe we think?
Could be. It's a good question, because I think, last year they really started to view Sam Hilliard as much more of a veteran presence, which, in many ways he is. I mean, Jake Cave was that veteran presence and didn't really have a ton of full seasons under his belt that you look at and go, oh, this was a guy for a period of time, or he was the number 3 outfielder. Like, Sam Hilliard has very much had a similar career to a Jake Cave, except Hilliard is a homegrown guy. And other than that one season in Atlanta, he's been with Colorado, and he showed last year that, he's very capable of, providing, above average defense, has a great arm, can hit for power, can steal bases, was close to going, 10 for 10, right? Two double digit numbers, which, is hard to do when you don't play as frequently as Sam Hilliard doesn't play. So, he provides center field defense on days in which, Brenton Doyle needs a day. I think Jordan Beck is fine being in center as well, but you want him to have the everyday reps over and right. I think you could possibly see somewhat of a platoon. Strange to think about, but the left-handed hitting Sam Hilliard was actually great against left-handed hitting last year. I think that seems to be somewhat of a trend. I don't know if the Rockies are just one of those teams where they have left-handed hitters that hit lefties really, really well, and are just like average kind of against right-handed hitters. They seem to have a lot of those kind of guys on their teams. We've seen with McMahon and Charlie Blackmon, and Sam Hilliard kind of fits that mold. So not necessarily sure that you're going to get much of a proper platoon against right-handed pitching, because also you see way more righties than lefties. So that means Hilliard is now starting more games than Jordan Beck. I don't think the Rockies necessarily want that. So I think Hilliard just provides you with ability to play all 3 outfield positions. And again, if that final roster spot ends up having to go to a true utility infielder, because Farmer essentially is your 5th outfielder and Tolia in theory is your 6th outfielder, you've got plenty of depth. So Hilliard kind of, I think, checks off all the right boxes to make you feel good about, going with him, and, to give guys days off. And if someone does get injured and you're, maybe just need to get Nolan Jones off his feet a couple of days and no one's going on the IL, you're not calling anybody up, you can run Sam Hilliard out there for 3-4 days in a row, and he's going to be fine because he can hit lefties and he's pretty good at hitting righties as well.
Yeah, that is, I think, exactly what we need from Sam going into 2025. I I was legitimately very high on us bringing Sam Hilliard back last year when we did, with the idea of him having be the fourth outfielder. I think he got pretty much the exact right amount of playing time last year. He appeared in 58 games. He played center field, right field, and left field. He does all of that pretty well, especially considering how big the Coors Field outfielder is. He'll obliterate a baseball. Like I praised Sam for years of when he has his true power swing clicking, it is a effortless power stroke. And it's great. And like that's pretty much all I'm asking for in a fourth outfielder this year. And I don't want to see him in the starting unless somebody gets hurt. If somebody gets hurt, then I say, yeah, let's go ahead and we can slide Sam Hilliard into like the starting right fielder or something for a little bit while somebody recovers. But what I really want is for him to be that true veteran fourth outfielder of he'll get occasional starts, but he can spell pretty much anybody in the outfield. You could throw him in at DH as needed and just utilize his skill set to the best of its abilities without him being a full-on starter.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him because he another one of those bench guys that can come in off the bench late in the game, maybe provide that at least that power threat that maybe a Kyle Farmer is not providing. But hey, Sam Hilliard's right there from the left side, can come in as a pinch hitter. Didn't have too many appearances as a pinch hitter last year, but hey, he went 1 for 3 with a home run. So there you go.
He's still the only guy that I've ever seen in batting practice hit a ball so high that it hit the warning track and bounced over the Bridge barrier. I would have guessed that is an impossible feat to do. Sam Hilliard is able to do that and has done it.
He is a strong man.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
And one of my favorite bits of Rockies memorabilia that I own is I have the batting helmet that he wore when he hit his first big league home run.
That's pretty cool.
There you go. Yeah, he's another one of those kind of a 3 true outcomes type of guy almost. 9.6 career walk rate, 34% strikeout rate. But like we said, he has that power stroke. If he could get all 3 of those moving, he's a viable option that you can plug and play. But yeah, I think he's embraced that role. At least embraced the idea of whatever role the Rockies place him in, he's ready to go.
Yeah. He's talked about how it's like, I would love to be able to go out and earn a starting spot. And I think I could still do that. But if that's not what the Rockies need me to do, then okay. And that is about as good a mindset as you can have for someone in his position.
Yeah. Given the option between Sam Hilliard playing outfield and Chris Bryant playing outfield, I will take Sam Hilliard every day. There we go. But this player projection for Sam Hilliard, not a whole lot that we don't already know. Just hopefully just do more of the same. Replicate what he did last season in his limited role. But fun stuff. And that'll bring this episode of Affected by Altitude to a close. Patrick, we always appreciate you hopping on with us and spreading your wisdom with us and insights from being a Rockies insider.
Where did Patrick Wisdom end up? Is he still with the Cubs?
I don't think so. I think he's about to hit 45 home runs in NPB, maybe.
He is in the KBO.
Oh, so 55. He's gonna dominate. He's gonna be this year's version of Roberto Ramos. There's a nice pandemic callback. Yeah, I feel like you were setting me up to.
There's a name I hadn't thought of in a while.
Him and Sam Hilliard, man, those two guys were beasts in 2019 at Albuquerque. They were a 2-headed monster that were crazy. But yeah, I think you were setting me up to do my plugs. Yeah, Rockies Insider newsletter, Rockies Insider podcast, at Patrick D. Lyons, MLB on all the social media platforms. Did a couple of fun TikTok things where, you got to do all your different tiers. And I lucked out. It was hard. I was hoping that I was going to get some really good players. And thankfully in the end I did. And I did get Chris Bryant. So look, that's probably going to entice a lot of people to go try to watch that video and find out what tier I put him at.
Yeah, and you find Patrick. He does good stuff always, and follow him throughout the season. He's always got that good insights and It's tough when you're doing a podcast by yourself, but Patrick does it day in and day out. Does good work there. Evan, where can the folks find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky at EvanLang27. I would love to hear from you. I'm trying to be just continuing to be active on there throughout the season. It's going to be a fun season on a new social media platform and seeing how it goes. You can also find me on purplerow.com writing the Monday Rock Piles. And on Tuesdays, you will get the weekly Pebble Report. Remember that you can always find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, be that Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can also catch the video version on YouTube. Find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on most all social media platforms, including YouTube, under the handle at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop.
Mm-hmm. And find me over on Twitter at Skyler Timmons or over on Blue Sky stimmons13.bsky.social. Yeah, doing all kinds of stuff. Writing Wednesday Rock Piles for Purple Row and writing for fansfirstsports.com. All kinds of stuff. And be sure to check out our channels. Had our interview with Gabriel Hughes recently. Find that over on the podcast feed or YouTube channel. And then stay tuned. Coming up this week, we've got Zach Agnos episode as well. A little quick interview with him. Some good guys in that Rockies organization. We're happy to talk to them. But yeah, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, this has been Affected by Altitude. I'm Skyler. That's Evan. We've been joined by Patrick Lyons. Patrick, hit him with it.
Fare good.
Why fare well when you can fare good?
Farewell. This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.